You've driven past it 1,000 times, coiled along rotting fence posts, catching morning light in small, vicious points. You never slow down. It's wire, background noise in a landscape. But that thin, rusty coil closed the American frontier. It held armies in place for 4 years across the mud of Flanders, and it gave medicine a brand new diagnosis: a psychological illness named directly after the wire itself. 2 twisted strands, a few metal points, the cheapest fencing material in history. And yet, for a precise, brutal window in time, nothing on earth controlled the movement of human beings more absolutely. How a farmer's hardware solution became a weapon, a border policy, and a psychiatric diagnosis. The answer cuts deeper than you'd expect. This is object lore, history hiding in plain sight. Here is what most people assume about barbed wire. It's agricultural, functional. Farmers needed to contain cattle. Someone added points to wire, problem solved. That sounds right. It even is right. For about 30 seconds of its history. Because the moment barbed wire left the farm, it stopped being a tool. It became a mechanism of exclusion. Companies marketing barbed wire in the 1880s openly advertised it as a way of keeping out, in their own promotional materials, Native Americans, trespassers, and the poor. That language was not incidental. It was the pitch. The product was never just about cows. It was about drawing a line and making sure it hurt to cross. This is where the story actually starts. DeKalb, Illinois. County Fair, 1873. A farmer named Henry Rose dragged a wooden board studded with wire points onto the fairground floor, pitching it as the solution to cattle breaking through fences. Nobody bought it, but 3 men in the crowd quietly took notes. One of them was Joseph Farwell Glidden. Within a year, Glidden had filed patent number 157-124, not for a spiked board, but for something more elegant. 2 strands of wire wound tight around each other, with small metal barbs locked at regular intervals between them. The barbs couldn't slide. They couldn't be shoved flat. And for a 1,000-pound Texas Longhorn used to walking straight through ordinary wire, they held. The cattle stopped. The land held. The idea that one man cleanly invented barbed wire is satisfying, and mostly wrong. The U.S. Patent Office processed more than 200 patents for varieties of spiked fencing between 1867 and 1874 alone. Lucian B. Smith had filed a thorny wire design in 1867. Jacob Haish filed competing claims. The legal battles ran for years. But Glidden ultimately won. By 1876, his company was producing 3 million pounds of wire per year. A salesman named John Warren Gates, nicknamed Bet-A-Million Gates, was moving it across Texas. Within a decade, the entire Texas panhandle was fenced, but that was just land. The next thing barbed wire enclosed was money, and a great deal of it. Here's how fast it moved. In 1874, the year of Glidden's patent, barbed wire sold at roughly 20 cents per pound. By 1880, 6 years later, the price had collapsed to 3 cents. The wire had become so cheap and so abundant that it rewired the entire economic logic of the American West. And here's the assumption that deserves a harder look. Most people picture the open range as a natural, timeless way of life, one that barbed wire rudely interrupted. That sounds reasonable, but the reality is more specific. The law of open range was a legal framework, one that allowed cattle drives to cross land without compensation. It wasn't tradition, it was policy. And barbed wire didn't just change ranching practice, it overturned that legal structure entirely, shifting power from cowboys on the move to landowners who could afford the wire. By 1885, according to the Texas State Historical Association, the Texas Panhandle was completely fenced. Historian Wayne Guard, writing in the Southwestern Historical Quarterly, described longhorns driven mad by thirst, locked away from streams they had often been able to reach. Native Americans called it devil's rope. Wild buffalo, unable to see the thin wire lines, ran straight into it. They became trap meat. They died. The same wire that made Joseph Glidden a millionaire was reorganizing an entire ecosystem. What happens when that wire goes to war? September 1914, the First Battle of the Marne ends, and the Western Front solidifies into static trench lines. Both sides begin coiling barbed wire along the edges of no man's land. And they do not stop for 4 years. By 1918, accounts suggest that at least 1 million miles of barbed wire had been strung throughout Flanders alone, enough to circle the Earth 40 times. One eyewitness reported that the wire was so dense in places that daylight could barely be seen through it. Wire fields on the German Hindenburg Line extended as far as 300 feet into no man's land. German engineers configured gaps in the wire, not as openings, but as traps, corridors designed to funnel charging soldiers into pre-sighted machine gun positions. Whole battalions were slaughtered wholesale in those gaps. This is where the wire stops being a boundary. And just to be clear, the tank was not invented because someone wanted a tank. It was invented because barbed wire made infantry charges suicidal. And then there was the other effect, the quieter one. Swiss physician Adolf Lucas Vischer spent 1916 and 1917 observing prisoners of war held behind wire in camps across Europe and Asia Minor. His findings, published in 1918 as Die Stacheldrahtkrankheit, translated as barbed wire disease, described a universal psychological collapse: restlessness, apathy, and inability to connect to anything beyond the fence line. The cause, Vischer concluded, was not combat trauma, not injury. It was the wire itself. Prolonged captivity behind barbed wire did something to the human mind that had no precedent in medical literature. The duration of captivity determined the severity. Nothing else did. And that finding was about to become very relevant in a world that wasn't done building fences. Today, barbed wire still runs along working ranch fences across Australia, the American West, and the plains of Argentina, doing exactly what Glidden designed it to do in 1874. Modern high-tensile barbed wire, developed in the 1980s using carbon-strengthened steel, weighs half as much as the original, but performs as well or better. The best versions now carry zinc aluminum coatings that can extend their functional life to 50 years. But the wire has migrated, rolled onto the tops of border fences across the European Union. Strung above detention centers on multiple continents, W.H. Auden saw it coming. In his 1949 poem Memorial for the City, he wrote that barbed wire proclaims that you are kept out or kept in, and when you resist, it rips you. Farm tool, battlefield weapon, psychiatric condition, border infrastructure. The object never changed. Only the context did. So the next time you pass a fenced field, coiled wire catching the afternoon light, running quiet along a fence post line, pause for a second. You are looking at something that closed the American frontier. That held armies in mud for 4 years. That gave psychiatry a new word. That gave border policy its teeth. Same design as 1874. Same 2 twisted strands, still holding. Barbed wire is what happens when a simple idea about containing things outlives every reason it was built. If this kind of history interests you, the objects that hide the world's largest stories in plain sight, hit subscribe. New video every week, same question. What are we actually looking at? This is Object Lore. The history of the world is hiding in plain sight. Until next time.